Kia ora, g'day, welcome back here once again with another reaction video to Mr. Big Phil Campion, but this time he's been interviewed on the Team House podcast. So let's jump in.
Hey guys, welcome to episode 263 of the Team House. I'm Jack Murphy here with Dave Park, and our guest on tonight's show is Phil Campion. Phil is a former SAS operator, and now he runs Forces Radio, has a big project going on there that we'll talk about. He's done like 70 episodes so far. You guys will want to check it out. But Phil, welcome to the show. Thank you for joining us this evening.
Thanks for having me. Thanks, my pleasure to be here.
Absolutely, man. And like I was saying, it's you and I worked previously, so I mean, it's great to reconnect with you. The last time we saw each other in person was actually when we were both coming out of Syria. We had a beer in Kurdistan. It feels, right, yeah. But as you said, it feels like it was a lifetime ago.
It does, but you know what? Bringing it up again now makes it feel like it was yesterday in a strange way. Do you know what I mean? It's like, it's like, wow. You know, it's like, oh, let's just go back and have another couple of pints.
Yeah. So, Phil, I'll start off asking you, the question we ask most of our guests is about sort of what their upbringing was like and how that kind of took them towards military service. I was wondering if you could tell us, how you grew up and what that journey was like for you.
Okay, so I was born in London. The rumor goes that the doctor slapped me mother, like, do you know what I mean? I got adopted straight from birth, so I went to a family that had been vetted supposedly to bring me up, but that family failed as well, and they were quite violent. And my adopted father was extremely violent. I mean, he would literally punch my head in. As young as I can remember violence, and I can remember being hurt and punched. And I learned some really sort of like early on in life. I learned some quite harsh lessons, and I always say to people now, one of the lessons I learned very early in life was that if you can stay calm whilst all this stuff's going on around you, and I say this because he used to sit on top of my chest and beat me, and if I thrashed and if I sort of like fought back, he'd hit me even more. But if I went limp and I remained calm, it was almost like he lost interest and he would stop hitting me. And that is actually, we'll probably talk about a couple of instances later on in my life, where that has actually had to come into play, where I thought, right, hang on, calm down. Right, now I can think, now I can see, now I can hear, now I'm in control. And the other thing I learned from that was, it was a tiny win, because it was like I was controlling the situation against this great big man. And I was thinking to myself, well, it's not the greatest win in the world, but it is a win. And so one of the things I've tried to bring with me throughout my whole life is to always look for a positive where there's a negative. And if you can do that, your life will be a lot happier. So, yeah, going back to where we were, my childhood was pretty horrific. My adopted parents split up. My behavior at school was atrocious, and that's probably not impacted too much by my parents. I was just a naughty kid. I was a naughty kid. I couldn't concentrate. I didn't like the school subjects. I didn't like being in school. I would much rather be out playing soccer or climbing trees or fighting with somebody. So, my behavior was appalling. So eventually I ended up in a children's home at about the age of 12 years old, where they controlled my schooling and they controlled this, that, and the other. But it was there that I got exposed to predatory paedophiles. And I don't, it took me a long time in my life to talk about that. And I held it in for years and years and years. It all came out a few years ago when I was deciding to write another book. Anyway, I was groomed by these people to the point that it became very uncomfortable. And when I think back at it now, when I joined the army, and I did join the army almost from the children's home as soon as I could. I couldn't join at 16 because I had some violent crime, which stopped me from joining. But as soon as I was 18, I joined up. And it was actually the first time in my life I actually felt safe.
Wow.
And that's a bit strange. But, when I went through that camp gate, I realized that nobody, especially not these adults who've been sort of like wrecking my life on the outside, they couldn't get me being on the camp. Do you know what I mean? They didn't have an ID card. They couldn't come on that camp. And I did actually feel safe. I felt safe once I joined the forces. So, yeah. But yeah, wow. The question was about my childhood. Yeah, it wasn't a great childhood. Yeah. But I've drawn so many positive lessons from being a child. that I think it probably gave me the foundation to deal with a lot of the stuff that I've dealt with in my life since. Dealing with hardship to me as a child has teed me up to be able to deal with hardship as an adult, as it were.
Man, I'm going to pause it here because that, just hearing that in terms of Big Phil, had no idea in and around any of this stuff from him. Actually, I think somebody may have mentioned something in a comment once or twice that he had a pretty rough upbringing when I'd done some reactions to his other stuff that he's done on the 2-2 SAS or 2-2 SA selection series that he's done. But hearing this, man, I'll be honest, it just really makes me angry and sad for, with regards to what happened. I think he mentioned this family's been, or had supposedly been vetted, checked, good to go, because he was adopted, I think is what he said, pretty much from birth. So once he come out, I don't know what the details, I don't know if maybe he talks about it in here, but later on. But what an horrendous upbringing. This supposed blanking prick of a stepfather, punching him in the head, sitting on his chest, till he would go limp. Yeah, man, and then going into I think I heard him say went into a boys' home or into a home or something like that, or a youth something, I'm not sure, at 12 years of age, and then being exposed to pedophiles. Far out. Phil being Phil, acknowledging that, saying that he was a bit of a naughty child and his behavior was appalling. I'd say it probably had somewhat to do with, what the treatment that he was getting at home from his father, the negative type of treatment. But man, that is crap. Oh man. Sorry to hear all of that, Big Phil. Clearly you've put it behind you, which is awesome. But I also love what I heard him, and I know I've skipped a lot of stuff of what he's spoken about, but I love how he's spoken about it at least a couple of times. He's always tried to take a positive from the negative situations, and he's continued to apply that throughout his life. There's a lot that we can, any of us, you if you're watching, me here as I'm watching and listening for the first time, so many positives that we can take away from this guy, his example. Many other great people out there as well who've been through very difficult, hard times and have shared incredible stories too. I just gone blank right now, but I know that there's a few who we can also take courage from and learn from. But in this case, I'm tuned into Big Phil here and the guys from the team house. Salute, respect to those guys for having Big Phil on. I think they've had a whole bunch of people on. I've got to have a look at more of their content later on. But far out, pretty, yeah, makes me not happy anyway, listening to Big Phil recount his childhood and upbringing. Nobody should have to go through that, eh? It's bloody piss poor on the part of that supposed family and people in the homes.
It sounds like the British military was absolutely a much-needed escape for you from a really terrible upbringing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it would have been that, or it would have been prison, because the road I was going down, I was going to be violent, I was going to be loud, I was going to be poorly behaved. And the army sort of like put a cocoon around that as well. The army sort of like, they didn't completely stop my behaviour, because I still got in quite a bit of trouble when I was in the army, but it kept me on the straight and narrow long enough that I didn't get a serious criminal record for violent crime.
When did you start thinking about the military? And did you go to the military because you wanted to be in the military, because you thought the military, would be cool? Or did you go to the military only because it was like a way out?
No, right. So I went on one of the schools I went to. We had like an army cadet thing going on, a CCF they call it, a Wild Cadet Force, and I had a little bit of exposure to the military there. And anyway, when I left the children's home, I left early, and it was to be part of this scheme called the YTS, which was the youth training scheme. It was a government thing whereby you had to work for your dole money basically. So you could join this thing, and I got a job as a skiing instructor. Ridiculous. It was like unheard of. I got a job as a skiing instructor on a dry slope, and as a maintenance man on the skis and teaching skiing. So I was there for 2 years, and I thought, no, I've definitely got a job. And at the end of it, I went in to see the boss, and he was an ex-admiral from the Navy. And he looked at me, and he thought, a really posh man, and he said, "Oh, you know how they speak." He said, "Oh, what are your plans in life, Campion?" And I said, "Well, I'll be working here when I, sir. This is. I've got a nice job." No. You won't be staying here. You've got no qualifications. You're not what we're looking for. And we've helped you out for 2 years, but now it's time you need to go and find something on your own feet. And I looked at him as if to say, Jesus, I didn't expect that coming. And he looked at me really hard, and he went, "Have you ever thought about joining the army?" Well, I just thought right there. That's where I'm going. I'll think about it right now. And I went, yes, of course I have. I said, and looking back on it, when I've been in the CCF, that had been the only time I'd ever been happy in school. And that was because it was, once you had that green uniform on, you were all the same. And I thought, no, I enjoyed that. So I said to him, yes. And he literally picked the phone straight up and phoned the careers office and was like, "I've got a young man here. He'll be coming down this afternoon. You need to test him and get him out from under my feet as quick as you can." Like,
He's so awesome at telling stories, recounting, giving the accent even of this very posh former admiral, I think he said, from the Navy. But I would have been shocked and surprised too. He's been there for 2 years. I think that's what he said, 2 years, been there working, assuming he's doing a good job, assuming he's got ongoing work, and then next minute he gets hit up with that and told, "No, you won't be staying here. You've got no qualifications." It's like, holy heck, you've just had him there working for 2 years with no qualifications. Like, surely he's managed to gain some sort of quals applicable to the job that he's doing. But anyway, far out, that's pretty hard case how he's ended up in the army. Then the guy's on the blower, picking up the phone, speaking with whoever, and then he's off. I like the way he talks about how, I'm thinking about it right now. Yeah, of course I have. Hard case, man. This guy's, he's just awesome. Got a really good way about him. Been through, and this is just the start of it. I love how it's sort of shifted already from that upbringing to where there's quite a bit of laughter and stuff now. I'm not surprised that he's making both the hosts laugh.
I'm off. Cheers, boss. Oh, yeah, that was it. That literally, I went to the careers office. There was a big old guards bloke behind the thing, and he's like, at first, I'd only ever heard of really the parachute regiment and this big guardsman. He said, "All right, Sonny," he says, "what do you want to?" I said, "Well, do you want the army?" He said, yes, I know that. He said, what do you want to do? I said, "I want to be a paratrooper." He said, "No, you don't. Yes, you want to be a guardsman." He said, you want to do drill and salute the Queen and all. No, I don't. I want to do that. Anyway, they did all the tests on me, and it's at the end of those tests, they say what you're sort of like clever enough to be, basically. And mine said infantry, and that was it. You know what I mean? I'm like, you're going
I laugh because I can relate to that when especially how he describes. I like the way he describes it too. You do all your tests, and then it come back with your results, and they tell you what you're clever enough to be in the army. Yeah, and mine come back infantry. Yeah, hard case. I can relate to that. I was definitely deemed just smart enough to be an infantryman.
It was then I said to them, I asked them, I said, "What's the quickest I can be in?" And they said, "Well, if you join your county regiment," which was the Royal Hampshire Regiment, he said, "if you join them," he said, "we can literally have you out the traps and through the door in about 6 weeks' time." I was like, right, now sod the parachute regiment, I'm going there. Do you know what I mean? I'm like, I'll have that. I'll have some of that. So I literally, 6 weeks later, I'd done all the tests. I'd been up to a place called Sutton Coldfield. I'd had my teeth pulled. I'd had me nuts in someone's hand, and they'd done the cough and tickle and, all the medical stuff. And before you knew it, I was on the bus, and I was going off for me training, like, you know what I mean? And I was chuffed to pieces with it.
Are you tall? I'm asking because he mentioned the Queen's Guard, and I wonder if there's a height thing.
No. I'm sort of like, I don't know, 5'10" and a fag butt, I suppose. You know what I mean? I'm not tall at all. I think he was a guardsman and couldn't see anybody else be anything but a guardsman. Like, you know what I mean? He was barking. He was like, guards. You know what I mean? No. I don't want to be that.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't stand outside the Queen's house. That's not fun for me. Do you know what I mean?
It doesn't seem fun at all. Yeah. I mean, a lot of prestige with it. Yeah, a lot of prestige. It's sort of like being
honor guard.
Yeah, like honor
Washington,
guard
DC.
or yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, to me,
Yeah, bugger that. I wouldn't want to do that role either. I mean, massive respect to those guardsmen. I think Big Phil called them, with regards to what they do out the front of the King's Palace, Kings and Queen's Palace, I guess, for want of a better term, protecting, doing their job and their role. But that seems like, to me, an extremely boring and not the type of life or job that I would want to do personally. It's funny hearing Phil talk about that as well.
to be fair, right, and I'm not going to knock the guards. The guards do have an infantry side to their life. You know, they have a parachute platoon as well. So they do some tremendous soldiering. But my only image of guardsmen at that time was them in their red tunics with their great big hats on, stood outside the castle with people looking at them like, and I thought, no, that's not a bit of me. That's not, you know, I want to be running around. I want to be poking people like, you know what I mean? I do not want to be stood outside like that. I want to be in the field, covered in dirt, shooting at things and rolling about and maybe having a fight with someone like, you know, that's what I wanted.
Yeah.
I'm glad that he mentioned, I know nothing about the guards, but I love how he brought up that they have they do some infantry soldiering stuff as well, and a parachute unit or group to the guardsmen. So that's interesting. It still doesn't make me want to. It still wouldn't have changed my mind because what he's just described in the red tunic, I think he said, or their uniform and the big hats. Yeah, that's what I visualize in terms of a guardsman based on Phil's description, and that just does not seem like the type of job that I would ever want to do. But clearly it's for a lot of people and they enjoy that. And like Big Phil said, there's other aspects to it. So that's good to know anyway.
So tell us about, your induct into the military and the infantry life.
So yeah, I went to Depot Litchfield, which had I think there was about 8 different infantry battalions. That was the adult training station for them, and I started basic training, and I loved it. Everything to do with it, whether square bashing, the making your bed, I just loved it. I just loved pitching in, getting involved. And I say this to young people now. I was fit then because I just spent 2 years skiing. I was I don't know what you measuring over there, but I was light. Do you know what I mean? I was sort of like 80 kilos wet through, like, do you know what I mean? And that was light then for me. Do you know what I mean? So I loved it. And I was fit as a butcher's dog as well. Do you know what I mean? I could run all day. So, you'd get some lads there when they said, right, we're going out to do some fitness today. They'd be dreading it. I'd absolutely love it. I'd be right, yeah, come on, let's go. Get your kit on. Give me a log if you like. I don't care. Do you know what I mean? I loved it. So, yeah, training was brilliant. And the other thing was I was learning something every day and something that I enjoyed and could see the value of. Do you know what I mean? When they were teaching me about weapons, I thought, well, if I need my weapon one day, I better learn this lesson. So I applied myself. Whereas, in school, if you taught me about maths, I'd be like, well, where the bloody hell am I going to use this rubbish? Do you know what I mean? I don't need to know multiplication and that. How am I going to use that? But here I could actually see, I'm going to pick this weapon up. I'm going to learn how to use it. I'm going to learn how to strip it down. I'm going to learn how to clean it. And I'm going to learn everything I can. I'm going to be the best I can with that weapon because one day it might save my life.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? There was purpose for what I was doing. Do you know what I mean? And I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
And I remember, even in the early days, I remember someone saying to me, if you find a job that you enjoy, you'll never ever go to work. And if this for me wasn't work, I enjoyed it. It was fun. I loved it. We were doing cool stuff all the time, and I loved it. So it took about 6 months, I suppose, before you were trained and would get off, get sent and deployed out to your battalion as it was. And in that time, you'd done everything you needed to do. Your fitness was up to scratch. All your shooting tests had been passed. You'd been on a few exercises. And I remember I got best improved recruit because you have a passing out parade at the end, and I got best improved recruit. And I remember it was only about a year ago, somebody turned around at me and they said, you do know that best improved recruit means you was an absolute idiot when you turned up. I'll have it. I'll have that one. That'll do me.
Crack up. Hard case. The whole mood, at least for me, just feels like it's shifted, and that's because of Big Phil. Like just the way from where it was in terms of the upbringing. Glad that that clearly they asked their guests that question. Phil being Phil, just honest, transparent, upfront about how terrible that was. But just where we've gone from that to where we are now it means that you're a complete twat or something when you showed up best improved recruit. And it's like, I'll have that. It's awesome. It's awesome to hear. It's nice to see and to hear and to feel the shift, just even in myself listening to Phil. And that's that's a testament to this guy, man, in terms of his communication, his ability to tell a story, or recount experiences, lived experiences that he's had, and just shift the dynamic. At least it's shifted for me anyway, which is awesome.
Phil, well, I want to continue, but I got to do an ad read real quick. This is it. Jump back in after that amazing live read to your own story.
Okay, I've got a bit of a boner, actually. No, I'm joking, mate.
Just thinking about it, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Right, yeah. So jumping in, where were we? We were at Florida, weren't we?
You graduate, your passing out ceremony, best improved recruit.
I got best improved recruit. I've told you what that means now. And I went to my unit, and they were based in Tidworth, which is it's in the south of England. It wasn't too far from where, family and friends were. If I had family and friends, but I didn't. But most people in that unit did have family from around. It was the Royal Hampshire Regiment, so it was a county regiment, and we were based sort of like on the border of Hampshire, as it were. So most lads there came from Portsmouth or Southampton and had family down that way. And it was in those days, there wasn't loads going on, but they'd just come back from a tour of Northern Ireland. So they'd just done 6 months in a place called South Armagh. And so it was a funny time to join because they were all sort of like, they'd all been bashing through the fields and they'd had a couple of small incidents against the IRA. So they'd all sort of like cut their teeth on their first major operation. And then I turn up and it's like, oh yeah, he'll do that. It was like, it was a humbling experience because you go from sort of like being the top of the pile, when you pass out from the depot, your platoon is the best platoon, and and then all of a sudden, boom, you're at the bottom of the pile again. And it's quite a wake-up call. And I remember the first ever operation I did was an operation, the fire brigade went on strike. And we got called up to man these old fire engines and go down to Wales in these fire engines. Now, these fire engines were horrendous. They would muster about 10, 15 miles an hour, and that was downhill, do you know what I mean, empty. You know what I mean? Stick 10 blokes on it, fill it up with water, it would do about 5 miles an hour, and that was it, that bus. So we went down there, and I remember we didn't get called out at all. We just sort of like, every time we went to get called out, the fire brigade miraculously beat us there and put the fire out. So this one time we got called out, and it was to a horse that was on the mud flats in this little bay that they had. And there was someone had phoned up and said, there's a horse in the mud flat. Can we get down there and get this horse? So we all jump on the back of this fire engine. There's 2 of us go down there. We got overtaken by push bikes on the way down there. Like, it was completely embarrassing. We got there. And I think all you could see left of this horse was its 2 nostrils that were still poking out the water, but they were still moving slightly. And there's all these people going, go and get the horse. And we're like, well, what are we supposed to do with that? Like, you know what I mean? So we dragged the rope out, but by the time we got the rope to the horse, it had gone. It was like, there's no horse there anymore. Like, you know what I mean? It was completely gone under. So we're like, right, we'll sack that. We went back to the old... We went back to the fire engine. We're like that, right, there's no horse, lads. Right, let's go. So we went back to thingy. Anyway, I tell you that story not because it's any other reason than about a month later we had this parade through the streets of Winchester, and it was called a Freedom Parade, and you get handed the freedom of the town of Winchester, and Princess Diana was coming to this parade. All right, so we've done this parade in Hampshire. We've marched up and down, and afterwards she said, look, I'd like to meet some of the soldiers. So we've all been asked into the town hall, and we've stood there, and you're supposed to be out there, and the CO brings her around, and if she stops, you have to talk to her. So she stops by me. Hello, yeah, I'm Private Campion. Hello, Mom, how are you? Oh, tell us about your firefighting experience down in Wales, she says. So I'll recount the story of the horse. I mean, you can see the CO stood behind him. He's boiling. His head's gone red. The RSM stood there. He's steaming off as well. They're livid that I've told her this story. But the horse that piled him. And anyway, when I get back to camp, I'll get Campion, get up here. So I get called in, and I have to go to the guard. I got time. But the CO says to me, he says, why did you tell her that story? I said, well, what story? That's the only story I have. I said, what do you want to do? Stand there and lie to the woman? Yeah, it was great. Yeah, we put out fires there front and centre. I said, well, we didn't. I said, we didn't do anything of the sort. I said, we went to rescue a horse and we didn't even get that right. Yeah, they didn't like it. But there you go. That was
that horse's name was it? That horse's name wasn't Artax by any chance, was it? That's
Yeah, red rum.
Far out. What a story. And then to tell that to Princess Diana, may she rest in peace. Oh, man. I don't, I, easy to say now, but I can't imagine telling a story like that to a member of the royal family about the horse that you went to try to rescue. The nostrils are sticking out. By the time you went to get a rope, you come back, it's fully submerged, it's gone. So we'll sack that and then leave. I wonder what it would have been. Maybe he talks about it later, but it would have been good to hear Phil speak about, her facial expressions. As I'm guessing she probably just stayed pretty straight faced and listening. I don't know, but it'd be interesting to have seen what her facial expressions were like, and obviously the what was it? I think he said the commanding officer, and maybe his OC as well, or platoon commander. Geez, they would have been livid, all right, listening to this young fella telling that story about their time serving, doing some, being a firefighter for a time. Holy heck! What do we got time? Yeah, we'll go for a little bit longer.
Yeah, so that was it. So that was my first ever operation in the army. That was sort of like, and I came back and I actually felt quite chuffed about that, because at least I'd been out the door on something like.
right.
And then it was about 6 months later, I think we got deployed over to Northern Ireland for the first time, and I did a 2-year tour of Londonderry. So yeah, that was where I really, now you had to switch on. This wasn't rolling about with hoses and putting fires out. This was proper. This was like, there was people over there wanted you dead and were prepared to go to extraordinary lengths to try and help you get there. Like, do you know what I mean? So yeah, that was my first real operational experience with Northern Ireland.
So what can you tell us what year that was, and sort of like what the situation was like, politically, or from your point of view, militarily?
Okay, so look, listen, I'm going to be honest with you, right? I never massively, it was 1989, by the way. I never massively got into the politics of it, purely because I thought you needed to take a balanced perspective from both sides to understand what was going on. So I read loads of books before I went out there, loads of books on both sides of how this thing had manifested itself and why there was so much trouble out there. And in a nutshell, the thing had been going on for years and years and years. The English had been over to Ireland. They'd been, they'd done some poor things down the south. I'm going to tell you, right? So it wasn't all as it might seem. So basically, I understood when I went out there on both sides of the argument how things worked. Like, do you know what I mean? Now, I'm not ever going to condone terrorism, because it's wrong, and it is wrong. But there was terrorists on both sides of the wire over there, and both of them, from my perspective, would be treated with the same contempt. I had no time for either of them. Like, do you know what I mean? There's no beating around the bush for that. Do you know what I mean? For the same reason that, the same thing. If you supported either of these terrorist groups, well, then I'm afraid I'll lump you in on the same category. Do you know what I mean? So it's basically Protestant or nationalist. If you decided that you were going to back a Protestant terrorist organisation, well, I don't want to know about you. The same as I don't want to know about anybody who wants to back a Catholic organisation, terrorist organisation either. Do you know what I mean? So, yeah, I had a pretty balanced understanding of what was going on out there, to the point that I actually openly have said before that if I'd have been a young man growing up on some of these estates, I might have leaned one way or the other. Do you know what I mean? I can't say that I wouldn't have got involved in terrorism myself, because when you get pressed into a corner, sometimes it is the only way. So, as wrong as it is, I've never got everything right in my life. Do you know what I mean? And I think if you'd have come into my housing estate where I lived as a kid, and you'd have been sort of like an unwanted presence, and there'd have been enough peer group pressure from the rest of the council estate to get involved, I would have got involved. Do you know what I mean? Because that's almost a natural thing to do, isn't it? So
right.
It's cool to hear him say that too. Yeah, we can become products of our environment, and the things that happen, what we get exposed to, the activities that we might choose to voluntarily participate in, as another example. But man, far out. It's interesting also too, like I've never been big on the politics of things. People have often asked me questions around, your thoughts on when you went into Iraq, and thoughts on East Timor, thoughts on Afghanistan, a whole bunch of things. Even when I was working private security in and out of the Middle East and in other places, people would ask my view of the political situation. I was like, I never took any time to look into the political view, because much for the similar reasons. It's good hearing Phil talk about this. Much for similar reasons that you're going to get one side's version of it, depending on which political picture you look at. And then if you take the time to listen to the other side, then you're going to get a heavy bias towards their issues, their concerns, right or wrong. But what does interest me is how much he said he spent time reading on both sides to get a really good understanding of what he was about to go into. And that's awesome to hear him talk about that. I don't know where he learnt that from, whether that was just something that he naturally felt he should do, or whether it was because of other people that he knew, or maybe other leaders, that was something that maybe that was encouraged for them to do. I don't know. But that's smart, man. From my view anyway, sitting here listening to him and what he did, because he would have still been pretty young at that age, maybe early 20s, or early 20s, I'm guessing. Not sure, maybe early to mid 20s. That's still early 20s. But yeah, that's smart, I think, as I look back, because I wasn't doing any of that. I still don't enjoy reading now. I think I've mentioned that on other videos, but awesome to hear. We're about 22 minutes in. It's just over 34 minutes on here now. I think there'll be some stuff that I'll cut out of there, including the ad read that was in there, so it'll be less than that. But really enjoying this. Appreciate those that have sent through this suggestion, along with many others, for me to react to listen to. I really enjoy listening to Big Phil talk. I've mentioned before, I love the way that he's been able to shift the mood and shift how I felt as well, particularly early on into the upbringing that he was talking about. And just looking forward to hearing more. So this is a 2-hour and 5-minute interview by the looks of things, and no doubt I'll be laughing a lot more as we go through. So appreciate your time. Appreciate anybody that spent any time here, come along, watched, etc. Thank you all very much. As always, man, anybody going through any challenges, trials, struggles, heartache, just know that you're not alone. If you can, there's lots that you can take from Big Phil at the start, where he tries to always grab a positive, regardless of the situation, regardless of how negative it is. I realize it's easier said than done. We've all been, yourself and I and everybody else that we know, have all been through some pretty dark and miserable spaces. So I 100% get it. It's easier said than done. But if you can, if I can just encourage you to just keep turning up, keep staying in the fight, keep putting one foot in front of the other, stay as consistent and as disciplined as you can, and know that the sun will shine again, that there are better days ahead, that there is a light at the end of the tunnel. So as always, go always a little further. Remember, who dares wins and who cares wins. And until the next video, a big mana wave coming from me to you, filled with my aroha, respect, appreciation, and gratitude for you all.